Let us now make our voices heard. I pledge to serve and to push my country. I pledge to live like a citizen.
Good morning. And welcome. Thank you for making your Civic Saturday about our civic community. Thank you for getting up. Thank you for showing up. I'm Janae Kane on behalf of our Citizen University team and the extended Civic Saturday community around the country. I want to welcome you here. I want to welcome you and I want to invite you to participate in this new civic ritual we call Civic Saturday. I want to talk to you a little bit about why we're here today and what we're going to be doing together. This is a community of people who recognize and feel the deep disconnectedness and cynicism in our current civic life. Maybe you feel it just in fleeting moments. Maybe you feel it most of the time. But for whatever reason, you came here this morning because you believe there is something you can do about it. We agree. And now I invite you not to sit back and relax, but to sit up and engage. Help us truly build a culture of powerful, responsible citizenship, starting here this morning, but extending much farther beyond any Saturday morning. Thank you.
What we're going to do right now is we're going to take a moment to just meditate in my version of meditation. So I invite you right now to take a moment with yourself, and if you are comfortable enough in this space, to close your eyes and to breathe at your own pace. And while you are still breathing at your own pace, I would like you to think about what is it that you would like to reflect upon this weekend. Is there something in your life at this moment that needs to have a reset? All right. Good. I'd like to introduce to you your poet for the beginning of this portion. Marcus John is a writer, teacher, poet, author, and musician. Born and raised in Yonkers, New York, with Grenadian roots, as the youngest of 7 children, Marcus has always found joy through writing and performing. Yeah. Marcus is a believer, a leader, a brother to many, and a good friend of mine. His goal is to write, to inspire free thought, open communication, and to bring love from the back to the front. Please welcome my friend, Marcus John.
I was invited today to write a poem about responsibility, and this is my poem called Responsible. I am responsible for my body, responsible for my heart, responsible for my happiness. Found myself not being too compassionate to myself. While on a journey to find myself, I find myself picking at scabs, unearthing this skin like a burial ground. I fashioned the dead for far too long, got comfortable wearing the remains of others. These clothes never fit me, do absolutely nothing for my shape, yet and still I don these threads every day. I see negative reflections and model their behavior, starting to notice it clashes with my spirit. I remove the ensemble and see the rashes, with needs too deep to scratch the surface. Accountability itches, demanding your attention, setting in, showing up like an uninvited stain. We need to change and stop dressing up for audiences we're no longer meant to entertain. I guess the Creator made a sty out of my pigment as a sign. I will no longer lay my pearls before swine. I am responsible for my body, responsible for my heart, responsible for my happiness. Allowing love to be the catalyst, these days we treat emotion like experiment, collecting data and statistics to neutralize our feelings. I text you I love you instead of telling you. My world shatters every time I press send. I don't think you're receiving the depth of my messages. Expression is expressive. Stop repressing. We keep pressing these buttons, hoping to push past the barriers, set restrictions by a screen. My mood is 160 characters. This love is a full-piece orchestra playing in perfect pitch during prime time at center stage. Please don't mute my melodies. Harmonies were meant to be heard, no matter how they're received. Sing that song at missed contention. Your instrumental's always on repeat. That's why the heart comes with a beat. I am responsible for my body, responsible for my heart, responsible for my happiness. One day we'll sit back and laugh at this and find the humor in it all. Life provides the greatest punchlines. We must learn to stomach the impact, remain quick-witted and sharp, because sometimes the setup cuts deep, literally leaving us in stitches. Open wounds left raw from roasting sessions, cope with depression by adding it on to the act. Pretend like it's always been there, like a prop, like the backdrop, sitting like a puppet on my lap. It speaks for me. It pulls strings. It be having me rolling on the floor, cracking up, the opposite of stand up. Still, I write the antidotes to the adversity, becoming tickled by the tragedies. We laugh now wholeheartedly and cry later healthily. My only solace as I riddle through the crowds, searching for reason, but finding acceptance, is that my greatest tell will be rediscovering self-reception. As we look toward triumph and chuckle at the trauma, we'll begin to remember this life is supposed to be a comedy, not a drama. And we are responsible for our bodies, responsible for our hearts, responsible for our happiness. I am responsible for my body, responsible for my heart, responsible for my happiness, and so are you. Peace. My name is Marcus C. John. Thank you very much, Seattle, for having me out here today.
Thank you so much, Marcus. That was fantastic. We're so glad to have you here. And hello, welcome to you all. I'm Tatum Fotheringale. I'm the program manager for Civic Saturday, and I feel lucky to have that job. Hello to all of you who are new, who I've met before here, who come every single time. Truly, I'm so excited for this morning. So what we're going to do now is our portion where you get to talk to each other and maybe meet someone new. I hope you meet someone new. Don't talk to somebody you know. You can talk to them later. So we, for the next 8 minutes, are going to sit together and try and roughly do 4 minutes each to talk about what is a social problem that you have treated as not your problem. So in about 4 minutes, I'll pop up and give you a reminder and get to know somebody new and enjoy. What we're going to do now is have readings of civic scripture, which are readings, texts, and excerpts of pieces that reflect on the American Creed.
I will be reading A. Bartlett Giamatti, Commissioner of Baseball's statement on the banishment of Pete Rose from the game, August 24th, 1989. My purpose in recounting the process and the procedures animating that process is to make 2 points that the American public deserves to know. First, that the integrity of the game cannot be defended except by a process that itself embodies integrity and fairness. Second, Should any other occasion arise where charges are made or acts are said to be committed that are contrary to the interests of the game or that undermine the integrity of baseball, I fully intend to use such a process and procedure to get to the truth and, if need be, to root out offending behavior. I intend to use, in short, every lawful and ethical means to defend and protect the game. I say this so that there may be no doubt about where I stand or why I stand there. I believe baseball is a beautiful and exciting game loved by millions, I among them. And I believe baseball is an important, enduring American institution. It must assert and aspire to the highest principles of integrity, of professionalism of performance, of fair play within its rules. It will come as no surprise that, like any institution composed of human beings, this institution will not always fulfill its highest aspirations. I know of no earthly institution that does. But this one, because it is so much a part of our history as a people, and because it has such a purchase on our national soul, has an obligation to the people for whom it is played, to its fans and well-wishers, to strive for excellence in all things and to promote the highest ideals. I will be told I am an idealist. I hope so. I will continue to locate ideals I hold for myself and for my country in the national game, as well as in other of our national institutions. And while there will be debate and dissent about this, or that, or any other occurrence on or off the field, and while the game's nobler parts will always be enmeshed in the human frailties of those who, whatever their role, have stewardship of this game, let there be no doubt or dissent about our goals for baseball or our dedication to it, nor about our vigilance and vigor and patience in protecting the game from blemish or stain or disgrace. The matter of Mr. Rose is now closed. It will be debated and discussed. Let no one think it did not hurt baseball. That hurt will pass, however, as the great glory of the game asserts itself and a resilient institution goes forward. Let it also be clear that no individual is superior to the game.
Hello, everyone. I'll be reading Excerpt from Democracy in America, Volume 2, by Alexis de Tocqueville, published in 1835. The free institutions of the United States and the political rights enjoyed there provide 1,000 continual reminders to every citizen that he lives in society. At every moment, they bring his mind back to this idea, that it is the duty as well as the interest of men to be useful to their fellows, having no particular reason to hate others, since he is neither their slave nor their master. The American's heart easily inclines towards benevolence. At first, it is of necessity that men attend to the public interest, afterward by choice. What had been calculation becomes instinct. By dint of working for the good of his fellow citizens, he in the end acquires a habit and a taste for serving them.
Good morning. I'm so grateful to be with you this morning, so glad to be back here in our home at the Impact Hub, and also so glad to be in Pioneer Square, rooted in this neighborhood. And I want to begin today's sermon by saying something that I may not get to say again for a long while, which is this. The Seattle Mariners are tied for the most wins in Major League Baseball right now. No one has more wins than the Mariners. That's true, it's only 1 week into the season. And most experts do expect them to finish the year in last place. But what a gift it is. What a gift in early April to imagine winning next week and the week after. To imagine a compounding habit of winning. The expectation-defying emergence of a culture of winning. Savor that possibility. It has not yet evaporated. The point of baseball fandom is to savor possibility. And to remember that possibility is always more satisfying than probability. In this age of endless data analytics that dissect each player's patterns and tendencies, we know way too much about what is probable in baseball. But during the marathon of a season, the arc of a series, the course of a game, the dance of an at-bat, the explosion of a single pitch, we live for what is possible. What separates baseball from the lesser sports, which is to say all other sports, is that in its central conflict between pitcher and batter, it captures two mysteries of human experience: chance and causation. At each scale, from full season to single pitch, random and microscopic shifts in circumstance can turn the tide. And once something has happened, it's really hard to assign credit or blame clearly to determine who caused it. Oh, we pretend to, of course. When our favorite slugger hits a walk-off home run in the ninth inning, we credit his brawn, his eagle eyes, the ice water in his veins, his unerring instinct for sensing what pitch was coming next. Yet in that moment, we completely forget that our counterpart from the other team's fan base, who's screaming in anguish, is fixing blame on their idiot pitcher and his weak arm and jittery nerves and choker's heart. Which of these stories is true? Which one is truer? Did the batter succeed or did the pitcher fail? Who caused that game-ending outcome? When we watch that brightly lit home run ball sailing through the nighttime sky, what makes the flight of the ball last so long, whether we are cheering it or crying it, is that while we watch it, we are simultaneously and instantaneously creating a total and zero-sum narrative of responsibility. And that is the topic I'd like to explore today. Not baseball, although I will have more to say about that this morning. I mean responsibility. What does it mean to be responsible? There are two ways to interpret that question. The first is, for what should we be properly blamed or held to account? The second is, in what ways are we living up to an obligation or expectation? One is about blame. The other is about duty. I want to unpack these two meanings because both are at play in our lives as Americans today, and because our political culture has increasingly privileged one definition over the other, with corrosive consequences for us all. Let me start with responsibility as blame. The philosopher Alva Noah, in a short new book called Infinite Baseball, describes the sport as forensic in nature. That is, it's all about assessing the scene of the action and evaluating who did what exactly. Should a third baseman be given an error for not fielding a scorching ground ball cleanly and thus allowing a runner to score? Is it reasonable to assume that an average third baseman would have made that play and prevented the run? What is the key link in the causal chain here, and who owns that link? Players and fans alike are constantly assigning responsibility for outcomes like this. In Noah's view, this forensic work is not incidental to the game, it is at the heart of it. The flip side of blame is credit. Under the rules of baseball, if that third baseman is assigned an error by the official scorer, then the batter is denied credit for a hit. Moreover, the pitcher is not blamed for giving up that run. The run is called unearned, and it won't count against his earned run average. But whatever the official scorer decides, fans make our own judgments about who should have done what. And these are, of course, utterly biased and utterly distorted by our rooting interest. What's important about baseball is that it captures in miniature the habit we humans have of creating forensic stories of culpability out of patterns of random action. And then living by the morals of those stories, that is, imbuing them with meaning that guides all our future choices. To take one example from the game of politics, did Hillary Clinton blow it, or did Donald Trump crush it? One way to interpret the nascent Democratic presidential primary race is that it is a competition among narratives of responsibility for 2016. That is, who is to blame and why. Some of the 2020 candidates have as their rationale the idea that the failure, the error, was in ignoring white working-class voters in Appalachia and the Rust Belt. Others believe that the failure was in not giving young progressives and voters of color a fresh enough alternative. Others still think the failure was in having a nominee who was just too polarizing and who made it just too easy for her opponent to divide and conquer. Implicit in all these narratives, of course, is the notion that Hillary Clinton did blow it and is to blame. Each 2020 Democratic candidate has their own theory of how Clinton blew it and why they're the right person to correct for her fatal errors. This is a natural way for candidates to try to earn supporters. But it is deeply misleading because it blocks from the field of vision a vast array of other interpretations of responsibility and causation. Maybe Clinton didn't blow it so much as Trump crushed it. Maybe Trump crushed it because he's a genius and there's something important to learn from his way of tapping into popular culture and subconscious anxiety among the people. Or maybe he crushed it because he got just enough help from Russian bots and online saboteurs who sowed dissent and misinformation and dampened turnout among Democrats. We can't say for sure. Even if we get someday to read every unredacted page of the Mueller report, we won't be able to say for sure. Why? Because in life, as in baseball, everything causes everything. Actually, in life, as in baseball, we tend to fixate on the most recent and most tangible causes. That game-winning home run I was imagining before, or that run-yielding error by the third baseman, neither of those might have mattered, except that a numberless array of other interactions and confrontations during the game went the way they did. Had one of those earlier events gone differently, the score might have been different, the psychological balance might have been changed, and maybe the home run would not have mattered. Maybe there wouldn't even have been a home run. This is metaphysical musing. But what's real is what we do with it. Since we must, in our drive for narrative neatness, assign responsibility somewhere, we will. And once we do, even though on some level we know this assignment of responsibility is arbitrary and something of a fiction, a necessary lie, we will invest it with the feeling of truth and become emotionally attached to it. We will need it. Let's take a more local example. Are tech companies like Amazon, who have made Seattle so suddenly expensive, responsible for the surge in homelessness? Or are the too lenient, less than competent agencies of our government responsible? Again, the truth is indeterminate. So the fight is over whose version of the truth will predominate. And that fight is not just in the media or in the public square. It is in our hearts. If I have in my heart a story that says, these homeless people are weak-willed addicts and criminals, drawn here by generous benefits, I have put responsibility for their fates on them. I have removed it from me. But if I have a story that says they are afflicted by addiction or by job loss and circumstances of political economy beyond their control, then another story emerges. Those two very different stories of agency will yield two very different ways of not just seeing, but behaving. Consider that if you are not homeless, you have probably formed a set of heuristics, a subconscious flow chart of responsibility assigning that guides you in your everyday reactions as you encounter people who are without homes. Let me be upfront about mine. I tend not to give to panhandlers, though I always look them in the eye when I decline. I always buy real change, the street paper made and sold by people who are or have been homeless. I regularly donate money to nonprofits that work systematically to provide housing and mental health services to the homeless. I supported the head tax that would have funded far more housing and services. Implicit in my little rule set is a story of responsibility that is heavier on the collective and lighter on the personal. There's some good in that. Homelessness in Seattle is surely a collective systemic failure. But if I'm honest, I will admit there's some evasion in it too. It absolves me individually of doing more for other individuals when I encounter them. Maybe I should do more for each one. And maybe I should expect more of them as well. Citizens University is upstairs in this building. If these shades were open, you could look out the window. But actually on these shades and on these walls here are images and stories of people without homes. And every day when we come to work here, we look outside and we walk past people living in tents on the sidewalk right outside here, or requiring emergency medical assistance across the street at the Mission across the street right there. Recently, a man died in one of the tents just on the other side of this window. Because we are not insensate jerks, we ache for these, our neighbors. Because we have finite capacities for empathy, we eventually move past the ache. Then what? The team here at the Impact Hub regularly organizes donations and aid for our neighbors. Our team at Citizen University spent a day meeting with people from the Downtown Emergency Service Center to better understand the dimensions of the crisis and the range of remedies. Many in this building, many of you here right now, are doing far more than that to be part of the solution. You may have a rule set that's very different from mine, more open-hearted or less, more trusting or less. That's to be expected. We're all different. But the problem with personal, unspoken rule sets is that they reinforce the idea that civic life is a series of one-off interactions guided by private ethics instead of a social compact framed by public ethics. We must make a rule set. Actually, let me go deeper. We must commit to a collective code of justice that is out in the open, that we name and say out loud. A code that is meant to make everyone more responsible for the crisis. This code should not be binary. In any public crisis, every person, every single one of us, bears more than none of the blame and less than all of it. The code should not coddle anyone either. It must demand more of both the powerful and the powerless. But the code should be toughest on the powerful. It should have an ethic of progressive contribution. Those who have the most and have the most capacity to be contributors should be expected to put the greatest proportion back into the commonwealth. Why? Because that is how a city or a country survives and thrives. When Tocqueville wrote nearly 2 centuries ago that, quote, "the American's heart easily inclines toward benevolence," he was not making a claim that among all humans, Americans were unusually altruistic or saintly. He was making the claim that through long habits of face-to-face democratic association among people who were civic equals, Americans, well, let's be clear, white American men back then, had internalized the truth that true self-interest is mutual interest, that we are all better off when we are all better off. This is the very distillation of the public code of justice we need to be reinforcing now. And here I've begun to shift from one meaning of responsibility to the other. We are all responsible in that we are all to blame for how things got this bad, by our actions and our omissions, our narratives of justification. But we are also all responsible in that we all have a duty now to fix things. We all carry an obligation to do more, be more, learn more, serve more, help more. I'm not just talking now about homelessness in Seattle. I'm talking about the divided, anxious, addicted, crushingly unequal state of our union. So let me turn now to responsibility as duty. Bart Giamatti was an unusual and unlikely commissioner of baseball. The grandson of Italian immigrants, he had been a scholar of the Renaissance, a professor at Yale, and then its youngest ever president at the age of 38. But more than anything, he was a lover of baseball, a devotee of every aspect of the game, its poetry and its prose, its gift and its grit and its capacity to glue our nation together. So when he was offered the job to become president of the National League in 1986, he ditched Yale and took the job. That was a few months, actually, before I arrived at Yale as a freshman. And I remember the slightly embarrassed way that professors spoke of Giamatti's self-inflicted demotion. But as a fellow lover of baseball, I understood and even admired his choice to leave Yale for the National League. 3 years later, he became commissioner of all of baseball. And the central act of his tenure as commissioner was his lifetime banishment of Pete Rose, the legendary all-time hits leader who had gambled on Cincinnati Reds games while he was the Reds manager. The banishment from the game stands to this day. But the stress of the investigation killed Giamatti, who was felled by a heart attack 7 days after his decision. I was thinking about Bart Giamatti last week, not just because the baseball season had begun, but because when Special Counsel Mueller filed his report and Attorney General Barr issued his cursory and perhaps misleading letter of summary, I was trying to recall what it looked like when the leader and steward of a public institution, after receiving the results of a controversial investigation, explains the results with integrity. Giamatti's statement was our first reading today. I truly believe it to be a piece of civic scripture because I believe baseball to be part of American civic religion. But it's also a classic of democratic ethics. If you were to substitute the words the democracy for the words the game in every part of that statement, you would have a statement that is like an Aaron Sorkin West Wing version of what we wish Attorney General Barr had said. For instance, quote, "The integrity of the democracy cannot be defended except by a process that itself embodies integrity and fairness." What Giamatti's statement says loudly, without ever using the word, is that we have duties. That when we get the privilege to be participants in an institution as cherished as baseball or as self-government in a democratic republic, we have a duty to maintain the health of that institution. And we should recognize that every one of the rights we enjoy within that institution is also a responsibility, every opportunity an obligation. In the law, there's a language of duty that is used to assign liability, fiduciary duty, for instance, or duty of care. I want to adapt this language of duty beyond the legal meaning of what you could go to jail for or have to pay a fine for, and actually convert it to a more normative meaning of what you could be honored for or dishonored for. Being responsible in this sense of duty means asking, what am I responsible for doing? How do I do my part? What actions and attitudes are expected of me if I am to be a citizen, by which I mean a pro-social contributor to community? Yes, I need to vote and volunteer and read the news and know my own mind. But I'm actually talking now about some deeper dispositions. Let me describe 4 of them. First, we have a duty to connect. 2 weeks ago, I was in Concord, New Hampshire, to announce a run for the presidency of the United States. Just kidding. I was making sure you were listening. Just making sure you were listening. I was in Concord, though, but I was there to meet with and speak to catalysts from all across the Granite State who'd been gathered by the Endowment for Health. The endowment is the state's largest health foundation. Like many of their peer institutions in other states, they have come to realize that the only way to improve public health and the only way to improve health outcomes sustainably is to address civic health. And at the core of civic health is connectedness, getting people out of isolation, creating opportunities for people, whether in impersonal cities or isolated small rural towns, not only to meet, but to act together, create art together, tell stories together, build power together. Loneliness kills. It fuels hypertension, diabetes, addiction. Inclusive collective action heals, revives, saves. We who have gathered here today are proof of that. It's why we keep doing it. It's why we keep coming back. And when we consider the presence of homeless people in severe isolation and disconnection, who literally surround us today, we recall as well that the connections we need making are not just among people of our set, but across condition and status and background as well. Second is a duty to cultivate. This week I was in Chicago for a meeting of local civic innovators that Citizen University helped to organize. And the evening before the meeting, we all met for dinner at a place on the south side called the Sweetwater Foundation. It's an urban farm and learning center created out of several once abandoned blocks on South Perry Street by a couple named Emmanuel and Gia Locke Pratt. At Sweetwater, they have gardening and aquaponics and printmaking and dance classes for kids from all around the neighborhood. There are artists in residence. They call them humans in residence, also from the south side. As Emmanuel said to me with a smile, we're building a campus here. We're building a little citizen university. And we ate inside a structure there called the Thought Barn. It was hand-raised in 2017 by the people of the neighborhood, making it the first barn raised in Chicago city limits in over a century. The tables and the floors inside are unfinished wood, movable into many combinations for common meals or dance parties. The chairs are handmade crates. The spicy cornbread and fried chicken and greens we were served were made by a local elder. And inside there's a big banner proclaiming, "There grows the neighborhood." Now, as a guy who wrote a book called The Gardens of Democracy, as someone who often says that rugged individualism never got a barn raised, I was just flabbergasted to be in there. I fell in love with Sweetwater instantly. And the message of the whole magical endeavor is that there is wealth already here in this often disrespected and disregarded neighborhood. There is wealth in the ground. There is wealth in the hands. There is wealth in the hearts of the people who live there. It's a matter of taking responsibility for cultivating it and making cultivation everyone's responsibility. The third duty, then, is what I call a duty to circulate. In my work on power, I often say that once you take a personal inventory of the various kinds of power and privilege you have, from money power to ideas power to people power to the power of social influence or just sheer muscle, once you take that inventory, then you face a very simple binary choice. Shall I hoard or shall I circulate? What we are seeing in things like the elite college admissions scandal in recent weeks is that many powerful people over many years have chosen to hoard. These folks indicted in this scandal have constructed a gleaming edifice of hoarding, within which the logic of scarcity becomes the logic of entitlement. There's a stunning and searing essay by Caitlin Flanagan in the Atlantic magazine, circulating right now online, about her glimpse into that edifice 25 years ago when she was a college counselor at an elite LA private school. The piece is called "They Had It Coming," which people like Felicity Huffman and William C. Macy and the like certainly did. They had it coming. But the they is not just celebrities and hedge fund managers now under indictment for bribing admissions counselors and coaches. The they is anyone who gives into the temptation to rig the game for your kids' college chances, for your own material comfort, for the psychic security of feeling like you deserve every little privilege you have. They includes some of us here today. And this duty I speak of now is a duty to resist that temptation to hoard, and instead to choose intentionally to circulate your power, to tax yourself, literally and figuratively, to disseminate insider knowledge that you hold, to spend capital bolstering those who may later challenge your hold on capital. Again, not out of saintliness, but out of self-interest properly understood. Hoarding kills. First, it kills those cut out of opportunity, but then it kills the hoarders too. As those LA luminaries learned, no gated community can keep out the resentment of the screwed over. Insecurity is contagious. Hoarding and monopoly make prisoners of us all. Finally, then, a duty to question myself. Over the last few months, I've been reading from very, very different political sources. I began reading Jacobin magazine, one of the smartest journals of the resurgent socialist left. Its writers are making a case from first principles about why many more sectors of our society need to be under state control and public ownership. I also began reading Robert Nisbet's classic, The Quest for Community, an Eisenhower book of conservative thought about how a centralized state undermines intermediate circles of association, from clan to church to club, and it leaves individuals lost and drifting and anxious, and easy marks for charismatic leaders with easy answers. More than reading, though, I've been listening. I've been listening on the right to thoughtful people who are now challenging their own long-held assumptions about the benefits of the market. On the left, to people who worry, at least privately, about the rise of ideological and identity politics purity tests. What I'm learning now is how to notice my own blind spots. And once I notice them, how to adjust my sight. This isn't an academic exercise. It's a matter of responsibility and self-interest. For how can I possibly change another person's mind if I'm not willing to change my own? These two ideas that I've explored today, responsibility as blame and responsibility as duty, are both part of our civic culture. But our culture too often focuses on blame over duty, on forensics over ethics, on punishments instead of expectations. We've got to recommit ourselves to the duties, to connect, to cultivate, to circulate, to question ourselves. If all we did with these dispositions, then the quality of political life, the tenor of democratic debate, the civic health of our communities would be so vastly improved. Now, I know that talk of duty and responsibility and obligation rubs some people the wrong way. Some of my libertarian friends hear in that language nanny statism. Some of my left-wing activist friends hear victim blaming. People with lots of power hear righteous moralism. People with less power hear disrespectful hectoring. I was recently in Detroit, where my colleagues at the Aspen Institute helped to organize a public event for a project we call the Better Arguments Project. The topic there was the tensions in Detroit between long-timers and newcomers in this rapidly changing and gentrifying city. These are tensions of race, class, and place, magnified by mutual stereotyping and mutual attribution of bad motives. Thanks to our partner there, an organization called Urban Consulate, we gathered over 200 Detroiters, both long-timers and newcomers. And the goal of the gathering wasn't consensus or friendship. The goal was simple humanization, a healthier way of arguing and navigating these power imbalances. The goal was to foster the conditions in which both sides might see themselves for all that divides them as in it together. We started the table conversations there with a simple question. What do long-timers and newcomers owe each other? Some people resisted the very idea of owing someone else. Some black long-timers felt they were owed more recognition, And they resented the hip white millennials, whom the media has deemed saviors of a dying city, especially when it was a prior generation of white power brokers who had disinvested in the city. Some of the white newcomers themselves, though, understood this feeling, this resentment. They understood it intellectually, but they in turn felt that they were owed more respect, or at least less hostility, for bringing new blood and new energy into the city. Over the course of the day, thoughts that people had kept to themselves were at last vocalized, not in flash floods of anger, but in a slow, twisting stream of trust building. At the end of the gathering, an older African-American long-timer came up to me, and she said, I have many misgivings about this day. I also think this day was a gift. And I could not have put it better. To hold misgivings and gratitude at once, to perceive how both have their roots, etymologically and spiritually, in the idea of giving. This is the soul of responsibility. I'll conclude today with a final baseball parable. Late Wednesday night, I noticed an MLB umpire named Ron Kulpa was trending on Twitter. That's rarely a good thing for umpires. And indeed, it was because in a game between the Houston Astros and the Texas Rangers, Kulpa had made a string of not even close wrong calls against the Astros. And when their pitcher and manager protested his inconsistent strike zone, Kulpa first ejected them, and then he really lost his cool. He didn't just argue back. He taunted them. And with a sneering, bullying smile on his face, he got right in the face of the Astros manager and yelled, I can do whatever the hell I want. And then he yelled it again, I can do whatever the hell I want. People went nuts on Twitter. There were videos and GIFs and lip-reading analyses and moral exegeses. It all came pouring forth. And I had to tell this story for two reasons. One, the guy's name is Kulpa. He was made to order for a sermon about culpability. The other, though, is to unpack why it is exactly that his behavior triggered this moral outrage online. Not just among Astros fans, but among baseball purists. It wasn't only that he was a bad umpire responsible for skewing the outcome of a game. Poor performance is galling enough. But it was especially that he acted as if he were exempt from the consequences of poor performance. The world is full of such people. But when they occupy a station in which we repose special trust and confidence, like home plate umpire in the major leagues, say, or President of the United States, it's worse than an abuse of power. It is a betrayal of trust, a mockery of the idea that no individual is greater than the game. And that wording I just used, by the way, reposing special trust and confidence, comes straight from the commissioning documents for senior White House officials and officers in the military signed by the President of the United States. When an umpire steps out of role, descends to being just another man with anger management issues, starts yelling and telling a player he can do whatever the hell he wants, and then returns to his role and punishes that player can do very little, and a fan can do even less. The umpire in this case is the rule of law. But when a president or any political leader acts irresponsibly to undermine the rule of law and give permission to other cynical political actors who wish to further erode civic norms, a citizen can do a lot, and a group of organized citizens can do even more. That's the one crucial way in which baseball is not life. In baseball, we the people are mere spectators. In life, we are players. In our life as democratic citizens, we are players, owners, managers, and umpires. And so even if some of our leaders right now are corrupted, conflicted, and self-dealing, in the end, we the people, all the people, are the stewards of the institution. We are responsible for its health and resilience. We are to blame when it falls into decay, and we have a duty to keep it out of decay. We can do that duty, and we will find joy and common purpose doing it. I will be told I am an idealist for believing this. In the words of Bart Giamatti, I hope so. Thank you.
Please open your hymnals to page 2. I wrote this song based on our theme today of responsibility, and now I give it to you. It is yours. I invite you to sing along with me. I'm going to teach the chorus of this song, and the chorus goes, I, you, we. Notice that change. And so the chorus goes a little something like this. And I have the power, minute by minute, hour by hour, to right the wrong with my words and with my song. Let's try that again now that you've heard it once. That first chorus. 3, 4. I have the power, minute by minute, hour by hour, to right the wrongs with my words, with my song. So please stand if you are able. You don't know the verses yet, it'll be a surprise. If you get the feeling in it, sing along these words again. They're for you and for us, this community. Look around, could it be? See the world you want to see, just like that. Eyes wide shut, ears turned down. Too much noise all around. So here we are feeling lost. Privilege comes at a cost. Chorus. And I have the power, minute by minute, hour by hour, to what? To right the wrongs with my words, with my song. Verse 2, it can be hard, but don't be shy. Look your neighbor in the eye. Where they speak, don't wait your turn. You gotta work to hear and try to learn. Where we are is where we'll be. Democracy starts with you and me. Verse 2, you have the power, minute by minute, hour by hour, right the wrongs with your words and with your song. So where are you from and where have you been? What's your passion? Let's begin. Our differences are just skin deep. Try to keep that in mind while we use the rest of time. For the greater good must be earned. The arc of justice is an active verb. Third chorus, yeah, we have the power, minute by minute, hour by hour, to right the wrongs with our words, with our song. Last chorus again. We have the power, minute by minute, hour by hour, to right the wrongs with our words, with our
very own Civic Saturday song. Give it up again for Michael for writing a Civic Saturday song. That was awesome. I'm gonna play that back on Seattle Channel later and be like, yeah, Civic Saturday. Okay. Well, the time is now for Civic Circles, which is time, again, to talk with each other, to process and digest what we've been talking about and thinking about here this morning, and to really make sense for yourself of the moment that we're in. So before we start, I'll do a couple ground rules, and that is what we're going to do is form up circles of 4, 5, 6, 7 people, and turn your chairs, move to where you need to move. If you need to move over this way, do it. Whoever joins your circle is meant to be there. And before you speak twice, try and make sure everybody has the opportunity to speak once. And we'll have about 20 minutes to talk about which civic duty from today's sermon, to connect, to cultivate, to question oneself, will you commit to doing this month?
What is it that we need to do individually, as well as a community, or as well as the city of Seattle, to engage ourselves in a direct way?
You know, I do want to get involved, I'll do campaigning, all that kind of stuff, but I'm also worried, you know, what if what I'm fighting for isn't correct? What if what I'm fighting for isn't what I'll believe in?
Good right now to come here to kind of share ideas, but I would like to kind of step in a little bit further. I just don't know how.
Like for me, I'm going to commit to looking towards myself and how these structures around me allow me to be the person that I want to be.
Thank you to Impact Hub and Town Hall who helped produce this today. And also to Elliott Bay Books in the back there, who's always with us. So stop by and grab a book if you can. And another huge shout out to Seattle Channel for being with us at these and being able to share it with all Seattle online. And once you go home, you can check out the sermon and readings. They'll be online on our website later this afternoon. And by the way, we'd love to see you here and would love to see you again on June 1st at Hillman City Collaboratory. So in just a couple of months.
Great. I wanted actually to let you be the first to know that we have a book coming out in May. This book called Become America, which is published by our friends at Sasquatch Books, based here in Seattle. Where's Molly? If she's hi, Molly, from Sasquatch, is a compilation of the civic sermons that I've written for the first 19 Civic Saturdays, from the very beginnings in 2016 through last summer. And it's really an embodiment of the community that we've created together, both here in Seattle and, as Tainum and Janae said earlier, with friends and civic seminarians around the United States. And so we're really excited about this book, and we will be launching it in Seattle on May 7th at Washington Hall. We're going to have a conversation. It's not going to be just reading old sermons, some of which you've already heard, but a deeper conversation about what it is that we're building here together and what it is that people like us, when we show up together, can, in the spirit of both Michael and Na and all of your discussions here, actually change the heart and the face of our community. So thanks, and we hope we'll see you then.
All right. So seriously, our warmest thanks for coming out on your Saturday and spending it with us. We really love you and our Civic Saturday community, so we hope to see you next time on June 1st. Thank you.